Augustine on the free will or the free choice of the will. We'll pick up our discussion here in part two, where Euodias is going back and forth with Augustine. And the last question or last discussion that they were talking about was the law and whether or not certain laws are just or unjust based on the lust and desires of man. And Euodias seems to be getting a little bit frustrated here and thinking that this issue of what it means for something to be evil and free is an endless debate. So we'll pick up here where Euodias says, "Yes, if only we could get to the end of such a great issue, personally, I think it is endless." Augustine, have courage and set out along the roads of reason with the support of religiousness. There's nothing so demanding or difficult that it is not made completely plain and easy with God's assistance. Therefore, let us look into A and B, trusting in God and praying for his aid. First of all, tell me whether promulgating a written law is helpful to human beings living this present life. Euodias, obviously, states and societies are made up out of these human beings. Augustine, well, these human beings and societies are the same sort of things. Are they eternal and completely unable to change or perish, or are they instead changeable and subject to time? Euodias, changeable, plainly, and subject to time. Who could doubt it? Augustine, suppose that a society were well ordered, responsible, and a watchful guardian of the common welfare, one in which each person regards his private interest as less valuable than the public interest. Then is it not right to enact a law whereby the society is allowed to create its own governing officials, through whom the public interest is overseen? Euodias, quite right. Augustine, well, now suppose that the same society gradually becomes corrupted. Private interest is put before public interest. Votes are bought and sold, degraded by those who covet honors. Society hands its rulership over to disgraceful criminals. Would it not again be right if a good person were then found, someone more capable than the rest, who would take the power to confer honors away from society and restrict its choice to a few good people, or even to just one good person? Euodias, rightly so. Augustine, then, although these two laws seem to be contrary to one another, one of them vests the power of conferring honors in society, whereas the other takes it away. And although the latter was enacted so that the two laws cannot both hold simultaneously in one state, are we to say that one of them is unjust and hardly ought to have been enacted? And this, he's speaking about the law investing society with the right to create its own governing officials versus the law restricting that power to only a few people. Euodias answers, not at all. Augustine, then let us call a law temporal if, although it is just, it can justly be changed in the course of time. Do you agree? Euodias, fine. Augustine, well, consider the law referred to as supreme reason. It should always be obeyed. Through it, good people deserve a happy life, and evil people an unhappy one. And finally, through it, temporal law is both rightly enacted and rightly changed. Any intelligent person can see that it is unchangeable and eternal. Can it ever be unjust that evil people are unhappy while good people are happy? Can it ever be unjust that an orderly and responsible society sets up governing officials for itself while a dissolute and worthless society lacks this privilege? Euodias, I see that this law is eternal and unchangeable. Augustine, I think you also see, along with this, that nothing in the temporal law is just and legitimate which human beings have not derived from the eternal law. If a given society justly conferred honors at one time but not at another, this shift in the temporal law to be just must derive from the eternal law, whereby it is always just for a responsible society to confer honors and not for an irresponsible one. Is your view different? Euodias, no, I agree. Augustine, so to explain concisely, as far as I can, the notion of eternal law that is stamped on us. It is the law according to which it is just for all things to be completely in order. If you think otherwise, say so. Euodias, I have no objection. What you say is true. This law, on the basis of which all temporal laws made to govern human beings are altered at different times, is one. Therefore, it cannot itself be altered in any way, can it? Euodias, I understand that this cannot happen at all. No force, no chance, no disaster could ever make it not just for things to be completely in order. Augustine, very well. Now let us see how a human being may be completely in order within himself. For a society is made up of human beings bound together under one law, a temporal law, as we noted. Tell me whether you are completely certain that you are alive. Euodias, what could I say that is more certain? Augustine, well, can you distinguish between being alive and knowing yourself to be alive? Euodias, I know that nobody knows himself to be alive unless he is alive. But I do not know whether everyone alive knows himself to be alive. Augustine, how I wish you also knew what you believe, namely that animals lack reason. Our examination would quickly get past the question. But since you say that you do not know, you are initiating a long discussion. The issue is not the sort of thing we can skip over. If we do, we may not succeed in reaching our goal with as tight a chain of reasoning as I think it requires. So tell me this. We often see wild animals dominated by human beings. That is not merely the animal's body, but even its spirit is so subjugated that it is enslaved to human will by habit and inclination. Do you think it could somehow happen that a wild animal, however ferocious or strong or cunning, could in turn try to subjugate a human being, even though many wild animals are able to destroy the human body either by sheer force or by surprise attack? Euodias, this cannot possibly happen. Augustine, right you are, but again, tell me this. It is clear that many wild animals easily surpass human beings in strength and in other physical abilities. What is it in virtue of which a human being is superior, so that he can command many wild animals, yet none of them commands him? Is it not perhaps what we usually call reason or understanding? Euodias, I don't find anything else, since that in virtue of which we are superior to animals is in the mind. If they were inanimate, I would say that we are more excellent than them because we are animate. However, since they are animate, something is not present in their souls, and so we tame them. That is present in ours, so that we are better than they are. Since it is apparent to anyone that this is neither insignificant nor trivial, what else shall I call it more rightly than reason? Augustine, see how easy it becomes with God's help to do what people think is most difficult. I for one admit that I thought this question, which I see has now been settled, was going to hold us back for perhaps as long as all the topics we covered since our discussion began. Therefore keep it in mind now so that our reasoning is airtight hereafter. I think you are aware that what we call knowing is nothing other than having in reason what was perceived. Euodias, yes. Augustine, then whoever knows himself to be alive does not lack reason. Euodias, that follows. Augustine, yet wild animals are alive, and it is now plainly obvious that they do not have reason. That is clear. Augustine, then look, you now know what you claimed in your earlier reply you did not know. Not everything alive knows itself to be alive, whereas everything that knows itself to be alive necessarily is alive. Euodias, I no longer have any doubts. Continue where you are heading. I have learned well that being alive is one thing, knowing yourself to be alive quite another. Augustine, so which of the two seems to you to be more excellent? Euodias, what do you think? The knowledge of life? Augustine, does the knowledge of life seem better to you than life itself, or do you perhaps understand knowledge as a higher and more authentic life? For nobody can know except those who have understanding, which itself is nothing but living a more enlightened and perfect life in accordance with the light of the mind. Unless I am mistaken, you have accordingly not rated anything else above life, but a better life above just any life at all. Euodias, you have grasped explained my view wonderfully well. As long as knowledge can never be evil, that is, Augustine, I think there is no way for that to be so, unless we stretch the word knowledge to cover more mere experience. Experience is not always good, for instance, experiencing punishments. But how can knowledge, in the strict and proper sense, be evil, since it is acquired by reason and understanding? Euodias, I grasp the distinction. Keep going. Augustine, this is what I want to say, that by which humans are ranked above animals, whatever it is, be it more correctly called mind or spirit or both, we find both terms in Scripture. If it dominates and commands the rest of what a human consists in, then that human being is completely in order. We recognize that we share many common characteristics, not only with animals, but with trees and plants also. We see that taking bodily nutrition, growing, reproducing, and flourishing are also attributes of trees and are contained in a lower level of life. We also noted that wild animals are able to see, hear, and sense material objects by smell or taste or touch. We admit that their senses are often sharper than ours. Add to this energy, vigor, strength in arms and legs, the swiftness and agility of bodily movements. In all these qualities, we are superior to some animals, equal to others, and even surpassed by some. Nevertheless, qualities of this sort are surely shared by human beings and animals, despite the fact that every action in an animal's life is pursuing physical pleasures and avoiding discomforts. There are other features that seem not to occur among animals, but are not the highest attributes in human beings. Take joking and laughing. Anyone judging human nature most rightly holds that these features are indeed human, but the least important part of a human being. Next there is the love of praise and of glory and the drive to dominate. Although absent in animals, we should not be thought better than animals because we lust after these things. When the pursuit of these things is not controlled by reason, it makes us unhappy, and no one ever thought to rank himself above others on account of unhappiness. Thus a human being should be called in order when these selfsame impulses of the soul are dominated by reason. For it should not be called the right order or even order at all when the better are controlled by the worse. Do you not think so? Euodias, it is clear. Augustine, therefore, when reason, or mind or spirit, governs irrational mental impulses, a human being is dominated by the very thing whose dominance is prescribed by the law we have found to be eternal. Euodias, I understand and agree. Augustine, then a human being who is arranged in order in this way seems to you to be wise. Is that not so? Euodias, I do not know who could seem wise if not this person. Augustine, I believe you also know that most people are fools. Euodias, that is true enough. Augustine, well, if fools are the opposite of the wise, since we have described who is wise, you surely now understand who the fool is too. Euodias, is it not obvious? The fool is someone in whom the mind does not have supreme power. Augustine, then what should we say when people are so afflicted? That they have no mind, or that they do have a mind, but it lacks dominance? Euodias, the latter. Augustine, I would very much like to hear from you the grounds on which you hold that there is a mind in someone when it does not exercise its sovereignty. Euodias, I hope you are willing to do your share as well. It is not easy for me to shoulder the burden. Augustine. Augustine, it should at least be easy for you to recall what we said a bit earlier. Just as wild animals are broken by human beings and then remain tame, so too humans would suffer the same from animals in their turn, as the argument proved, were they not somehow superior to them. Now we did not find this superiority in the body, therefore, since it is apparent that it is in the soul, we found that it should be called reason. We later remembered that this is also dubbed mind and spirit, even if reason and mind are not the same. Surely only mind can take use or make use of reason, and hence it follows that whatever has reason cannot be without mind. Euodias, I do remember these points and still hold them. Augustine, well, do you believe that only the wise can tame animals? I call wise those whom truth bids to be so called, namely those who have attained peace by subjugating lust to the mind's full governance. Euodias, people it is silly to regard as wise those people who are commonly called animal trainers, or likewise shepherds or cowboys or horsemen, all of whom we see controlling tame animals and working to control untamed animals. Augustine, C. You therefore have compelling evidence to make it clear that mind may be present in a human being without being dominant. It is present in these people, for they do things they could not do without mind. Yet it does not govern, for they are fools. And we know quite well that mind's governance is characteristic only of the wise. Euodias, I am astonished that we already reached this conclusion earlier, and yet I was not able to think of what to say to you. Well, let us take up other matters, for now we have found out that human wisdom is the governance of the human mind, and also that it might not govern. Augustine, do you think that lust is more powerful than the mind itself, which we know has been granted governance over lust by eternal law? I do not myself think so. The weaker commanding the stronger would not be a case of being completely in order. Accordingly, I think the mind must be more powerful than desire, for the very reason that it rightly and justly dominates desire. Euodias, I think so too. Augustine, well, are we going to hesitate over putting every virtue ahead of every vice, such that virtue is stronger and more unbeatable to the extent that it is better and more exalted? Euodias, not at all. Augustine, then no vice-ridden mind overcomes a mind equipped with virtue. Euodias, that is completely true. Augustine, now I think you will not deny that any kind of mind at all is better and more powerful than every physical object. Euodias, nobody denies this who sees, as is easily done, that a living substance is more valuable than a non-living one, and that a substance imparting life is more valuable than one receiving it. Augustine, then so much the less does a physical object of any sort overthrow a mind endowed with virtue. Euodias, most evidently. Augustine, well, can a just mind, a mind safeguarding its proper right and command, cast down from its stronghold and subjugate to lust another mind governing with equal justice and virtue? Euodias, by no means. Not only is there the same degree of superiority in each, but a mind that attempts to do this to another will fall away from justice and become vice-ridden, and thereby will be weaker than the other. Augustine, you understand quite well. Consequently, it remains for you to declare, if you can, whether you think anything is more excellent than a wise and rational mind. Euodias, nothing but God, I think. Augustine, that is also my view. Yet even though we hold this view with the strongest faith possible, the matter is difficult, and it is not appropriate to look into it now with a view to understanding it. We should complete a careful and diligent treatment of the question at hand. For the time being, we are able to know that, whatever the nature may be, that is appropriately superior to a mind powerful in virtue, it cannot be in any way unjust. Thus even this nature, despite having the power, will not enslave a mind to lust. Euodias, surely everyone would unhesitatingly go along with your argument up to this point. Augustine, therefore, since A, anything equal or superior to a governing mind, possessed of virtue, does not make it the servant of lust on account of justice, and since, in addition, B, anything inferior to it could not do this on account of weakness, as the points we have agreed on between us establish, we are left with this conclusion. Nothing makes the mind a devotee of desire but its own will and free choice. Euodias, I see no other conclusion so necessary to draw. Augustine, it follows, as you might already think, that such a mind justly pays the penalties for so great a sin. Euodias, I cannot deny it. Augustine, well, then should we count this as a light penalty? Lust dominates the mind and drags it back and forth, despoiled of the riches of virtue, poor and needy. At one moment taking falsehoods for truths, and even making a practice of defending them. At another rejecting what it had previously accepted, and nonetheless rushing to other falsehoods. Now withholding its assent, and often in dread of clear lines of argument. Now despairing on the whole enterprise of finding the truth. Lingering deep within the shadows of foolishness. Now struggling towards the light of understanding, but again falling back from it due to exhaustion. All the while that reign of desires savagely tyrannizes and batters a person's whole life and mind with storms raging in all directions. On this side fear, on that desire, on this side anxiety, on that empty spurious enjoyment, on this side torment over the loss of something loved, on that ardor to acquire something not possessed, on this side sorrows for an injury received, on that the burning to redress it. Whichever way one turns, greed can pinch, extravagance squander, ambition enslave, pride puff up, envy twist, laziness overcome, stubbornness provoke, submissiveness oppress. These and countless others throng the realm of lust, having the run of it. Can we think that this penalty, which, as you recognize, all who do not hold fast to wisdom must suffer, is in the end trivial? Euodias, I do judge this penalty to be harsh, but it is completely just if someone, currently at the heights of wisdom, were to choose to descend from there, and to be the slave of lust. However, it is uncertain whether there can be anyone who has willed or who does will to do this. We believe that human beings were so perfectly created by God and established in a happy life that it was only by their own will that they fell from this condition to the afflictions of mortal life. Yet even though I hold this with the firmest faith, I have not yet arrived at an understanding of it. If you think that we should defer a careful investigation into this matter for now, you do so against my will. However, what bothers me the most is why we, who are certainly fools and have never been wise, should suffer such bitter penalties. Yet we are said to suffer these things deservedly, for abandoning the stronghold of virtue and choosing to be the slave of lust. Were you to clear this up through careful reasoning, should you be able, I would not allow you to postpone doing so. Augustine, up to now, you have talked as though you had plainly found out for certain that we have never been wise, paying attention only to the time since we were born into this life. But since wisdom is in the mind, there is a deep question and a deep mystery, whether the mind had lived some other kind of life before its partnership with the body, and whether it lived wisely at some point. This question should really be addressed in its proper place. In any event, it does not prevent clarifying as much as possible what we now have on our hands. So tell me, we have a will, do we not? Euodias, I do not know. Augustine, do you want to know this? Euodias, I do not know this either. Augustine, then from now on ask me no more questions. Euodias, why not? Augustine, because I am not required to answer your questions unless you are willing to know what you are asking about. Henceforth, unless you want to attain wisdom, I should not discuss these matters with you. Finally, you cannot be my friend unless you want my well-being. Then you, for your part, will see in respect of yourself whether you have no will for the happy life. Euodias, that we have a will cannot be denied, I admit. Go on. Let us see what you are going to do with this. Augustine, I shall do so. But first tell me whether you think you have a good will. Euodias, what is a good will? Augustine, a will by which we seek to live rightly and honorably, and to attain the highest wisdom. Now see whether you do not seek a right and honorable life, and whether you do not passionately want to be wise, or at least whether you would venture to deny that we have a good will when we want these things. Euodias, I deny none of these things. Accordingly, I grant not only that I have a will, but also that it is good. Augustine, how much regard do you have for this will, I ask you? Do you think that riches or honors or bodily pleasures or all of these things together are to be compared to it in any respects? Euodias, God forbid such horrendous madness. Augustine, should we then not rejoice a little that in the mind we have something? I'm speaking of the good will itself, in comparison with which all the things we have mentioned are completely unimportant, things in pursuit of which we see many people spare no efforts or avoid no dangers. Euodias, we should rejoice a great deal. Augustine, well, do you think that those who do not feel this rejoicing suffer a slight loss when deprived of so great a good? Euodias, on the contrary, they suffer the greatest loss. Augustine, then I think you see now that it lies in our will to enjoy or to lack such a great and genuine good. For what is so much in the power of the will as the will itself? When anyone has a good will, he surely has something to be put far ahead of all earthly kingdoms and all bodily pleasures. Anyone who does not have a good will certainly lacks the very thing the will alone would provide through itself, something more excellent than all the goods not within our power. Thus, while someone will judge himself thoroughly unhappy if he has lost his glorious reputation, great wealth, whatever bodily goods, will you not by contrast judge him to be thoroughly unhappy, even if he has all such things in abundance? For if he holds fast to things that can easily be lost, and he does not have them when he wants to, furthermore, he lacks a good will, which is not to be compared with these things, and even though it is so great a good, it is only necessary to will in order to have it. Euodias, quite true. Augustine, then even if foolish people have never been wise, an uncertain, very obscure point, they are rightly and deservedly afflicted with these sort of miseries. Euodias, I agree. Augustine, now consider whether prudence seems to you to be knowledge of things to be pursued and avoided. Euodias, it does. Augustine, well, is bravery not the psychological state by which we attribute little value to all hardships and losses of things that are not within our power? Euodias, so I hold. Augustine, what is more, moderateness is the state that checks and restrains the appetite from things it pursues disgracefully. Do you think otherwise? Euodias, quite the contrary. I think it is as you say. Augustine, then what should we say justice is but the virtue by which each receives his due? Euodias, I have no other conception of justice. Augustine, therefore, anyone who has a good will, whose superiority we have been discussing for a long time now, would embrace this one thing as an unsurpassable delight, on the one hand pleasing himself, on the other hand taking complete satisfaction and rejoicing to think of it, judging how great it is and how it cannot be stolen or taken away against his will. Can we have any doubt that he is going to set himself against anything inimical to this one good? Euodias, he must set himself against it completely. Augustine, do we think someone is not equipped with prudence if he sees that this good should be pursued and things that are opposed to it should be avoided? Euodias, it does not seem to me that anyone can do this without prudence. Augustine, right. But why do we not attribute bravery to this person too? He cannot love or value highly all those things that are not in our power. They are loved by the evil will, which he must resist as inimical to his own most cherished good. But since he does not love them, he is not pained by their loss and holds them as utterly worthless. As we declared and agreed earlier, this is the work of bravery. Euodias, let us indeed attribute bravery to him. I do not think I could more truly call anyone brave than a person who bears with equanimity the loss of things that it is not in our power to get or keep, which we have found this person necessarily does. Augustine, now see whether we can deprive him of moderateness, since this is the virtue that restrains our lust. What indeed is as harmful to a good will as lust? From this you surely recognize that the person who loves his own good will resist lust in every way and sets himself against them, and so is rightly called moderate. Euodias, I agree, go on. Augustine, justice remains. I do not see at all how this person could lack it. Someone who possesses and takes delight in the good will, standing against whatever is inimical to it, as mentioned, cannot have ill will towards anyone. Therefore it follows that he would do injury to no one. This can happen only if he gives to each his due. And when I said that this pertains to justice, I think you remembered that you agreed. Euodias, I do remember, and I agree that all four virtues you sketched a little while ago, with my agreement, are found in anyone who takes delight in his own good will and regards it highly. Augustine, then does anything prevent our granting that his life is praiseworthy? Euodias, absolutely nothing, quite the opposite. All these points encourage and even compel us to do so. Augustine, well, is there any way you can avoid judging that the unhappy happy life should be avoided? Euodias, no, that is exactly what I think should be done. Augustine, but surely you do not think that a praiseworthy life should be avoided, do you? Euodias, if nothing else, it should be eagerly pursued. Augustine, therefore a praiseworthy life is not unhappy. Euodias, that does indeed follow. Augustine, then as far as I can tell, no further difficulty stands in the way of your acknowledging that a life which is not unhappy is happy. Euodias, that is completely clear. Augustine, hence we agree that someone is unhappy when he takes delight in his own good will, and on account of it he attributes little worth to anything else that is all right, let me start over. Augustine, hence we agree that someone is happy when he takes delight in his own good will, and on account of it he attributes little worth to anything else that is called good, but can be lost even when the will to retain it remains. Euodias, of course. That logically follows from the points we granted earlier. Augustine, you have understood quite well, but please tell me, is not taking delight in one's own good will and valuing it as highly as we described itself the good will? Euodias, that is true. Augustine, if we correctly judge that this person, who has and takes delight in his own good will, is happy, is it not correct that anyone having a contrary will is unhappy? Euodias is quite correct. Augustine, therefore, is there any reason for us to hesitate in thinking that even if we have never been wise before, nevertheless, it is by our will that we have and deserve either a happy and praiseworthy life or an unhappy and disgraceful one? Euodias, we have reached this conclusion by certain and undeniable steps. Augustine, look at this point as well. I think you recall how we described the good will, namely, as that by which we seek to live rightly and honorably. Euodias, yes, I remember. Augustine, hence, if it is precisely by goodwill that we embrace and take delight in this will, and put it ahead of all things that we are unable to retain just by willing to do so, then, as the argument has shown, our mind will possess those very virtues, whose possession is the same thing as living rightly and honorably. The upshot is that anyone who wills to live rightly and honorably, if he wills himself to will this, instead of transient goods, acquires so great a possession with such ease, that having what he willed is nothing other for him than willing it. Euodias, to tell the truth, I can scarcely keep myself from shouting for joy when such a great and easily acquired good has suddenly sprung up before me. Augustine, if indeed the joy occasioned by acquiring this good elevates the mind calmly, peacefully, and steadfastly, this is called the happy life. You do not think that living happily is something other than rejoicing in genuine and certain goods, do you? Euodias, no, I agree with you. Augustine, quite right. But do you think there is anyone who does not will and decide upon the happy life in all ways? Euodias, who doubts that everyone wills it? Augustine, then why do they not all attain it? We had said and agreed that it is by the will that people deserve the happy life, and it is also by the will that they deserve the unhappy life. The end result is that people deserve what they get. But now some sort of contradiction has cropped up, and unless we look into the matter more carefully, it will work to undermine the earlier carefully crafted and solid argument. How does anyone suffer an unhappy life by his will, since absolutely no one wills to live unhappily? That is, how does someone gain the happy life through the will when everyone wants to be happy and yet so many are unhappy? Does it happen because it is one thing to will in a good or evil manner, another to deserve something due to a good or evil will? Those who are happy, who must also be good, are not happy simply because they willed to live happily. Even evil people will this. Instead, it is because they willed to live rightly, which evil people are unwilling to do. For this reason, it is no wonder that unhappy people do not attain what they will, namely, the happy life. They do not likewise will what goes along with it, namely, living rightly. And without willing this, no one is worthy of the happy life or attains it. The eternal law, it is now time for us to consider it again, established firmly with unchangeable stability that deserts are in the will, whereas reward and punishment are in happiness and unhappiness. Thus, when we say that people are unhappy due to the will, we are not thereby saying that they will to be unhappy, but rather that they are in a condition of will upon which must follow unhappiness, even against their will. Accordingly, the fact that all people will to be happy, and yet are not able to be happy, does not contradict our earlier argument, because not all will to live rightly. The happy life is due to this one will. Do you have anything to say against these claims? Euodias, nothing. Instead, let us see now how they are related to the question at hand about the two kinds of law, temporal and eternal.